Hi, my name is George Zamora with Trident Real Estate, and today I want to give you some professional tips on how to screen a tenant in Miami. If you're a landlord, there's nothing else that's more important than to know how to properly screen a tenant. Not knowing how to properly screen a tenant can cost you a substantial amount of money in unpaid rent, damages, and legal fees. And I have a 7-step process to properly screen all tenants. The first step is the application itself. You must have the prospective tenants complete an application. At a minimum, there are several items that you'll want to require from any potential applicants, which are their full legal name, date of births, social security numbers, current address with rent amount and how long they've lived there, current landlord's name and phone number, and the names and date of births of all other occupants. You'll want them to sign the application and make certain that the application has the language in there that authorizes you to do a background and credit check. The next step is asking for their IDs. Always request a copy of a government-issued ID for all the adults that will reside in the property. This is important to help mitigate the possibility of false identity. The next step is proof of income. It's not enough that an applicant might have a high credit score. You want to make certain that they can afford the rent. To do so, I recommend that you ask for at least one of the following: the last 2 pay stubs, or the 3 most recent bank statements, or last year's tax returns. Once you have this, you'll want to determine what their gross annual income is. When you've calculated the combined gross annual income for all of the applicants, you'll want to calculate what the annual rent is for the property and divide that number by the combined gross income. By doing this, you'll be able to determine what percent their income the rent would represent. I typically recommend that you do not go over 35 to 40% rent to income. The next step is an eviction search. You want to be able to see if the applicants have any eviction history. If you do not have access to a service that could conduct a national eviction search, at the very least do a public record search with the municipality where they currently live or where they have lived in the past. The next step is a criminal search. The same applies with a criminal search as an eviction search, whereby if you don't have access to a national service which conducts background checks, you'll want to do a public background check within the county. The next step is a credit check. You always want to pull a credit report on the applicants. If you don't know where to obtain one, you can always ask the tenant to provide one. They can go to any of the 3 major credit bureaus and request and provide one to you. A few comments and tips when looking at a credit report. The first is, don't make a quick decision just based on the credit score. You really need to look at the full credit history to determine what's going on. For example, you might have an applicant who might have had credit issues in the past, but they're actively in the process of improving their credit by having made timely payments and paying down their credit card debt. I'd rather have that applicant over an applicant whose credit is on the decline because their credit card balances are on the rise and they have multiple recent late payments. The second is, you always want to look to see if there's any judgments that show up on the credit report. Sometimes you might see a judgment from an apartment community in there. Finally, the last step is landlord verification. You always want to speak with their current landlord or manager. When the landlord's an individual, I always go into the county tax roll to verify the name that the county has for the property owner with the name that the applicant provided on the application. Sometimes applicants will give information of a friend or family member to pose as a landlord. When you do speak with the landlord, you want to ask the following. You want to verify that the tenants have resided at the property. You want to verify the rent amount that they're paying. You want to verify their payment history. You really want to know how many times they've paid late and if they've bounced any checks. You want to ask if they had any pets in the property, and if so, how many. Ask if there's been any noise or lease violation complaints on them. Ask if they gave proper notice as to them leaving. When applicable, ask if they received their full security deposit refund, and if not, Ask why. The screening process might seem complex, but I assure you that you definitely want to take your time to make certain that you have all of the information necessary to select a quality tenant for your property. If you have any questions on the tenant screening process, I'd love to have the opportunity to speak with you. I'm George Zamora with Trident Real Estate.